Hello again. So this is the second part of the video for making bases for Gangs of Rome. If you haven't watched the first one, highly recommend that you do so, although you don't have to. So what we're going to be doing here is, after we've primed our bases with whichever color that you'd like, I've decided to prime them black, we are going to paint them. The colors that I will be using, I do have a variety of colors and different makes, manufacturers, but the ones that I'll be using, first one is from Vallejo, and it'll be Stone Gray, and the other will be from MSP, which is Shadowed Stone. On the first ones that I've shown earlier, I used a soft tone wash from Army Painter. On these two, I'm going to be using a strong tone to add a little bit of variety in the bases. So it'll be slight, but we'll see how that turns out. So initially, what we'll do, if you have a palette, a wet palette to use, I would highly recommend to do that. At this time, I don't currently have mine, but that's totally fine. It just allows the paints to last a bit longer. And what we'll do is we will place these apart. And using a mix brush, use a little bit of water. Always remember to water your paints down. And what we will do is we will add these together. Water these down a little bit. And we will just slide these guys together. And create varying tones in between. So obviously closer to the darker end, it's going to be slightly darker. And on the lighter end, it'll be slightly lighter. Just got those guys mixed. Clean that guy off. And we'll add a couple more drops on the side. Lightly wet. Since MSPs are pretty watered down as they are, we don't really need much water. Then we will apply it to the whole base as an initial coat. Adding water, like I said, just a little bit. You don't have to go overboard, because then it's just going to be like a wash and it's going to slide off and not really do anything. Try to make your brushes go in one direction after you fill in all the gaps, touch up here and there. But have them go in one direction, because then when you put on your second, third, and potentially fourth coats, if you're wanting to go that far, it's much, much easier to cover up, as opposed to your brush going all kinds of crazy directions. You take your time, fill it in. Don't be laborious. Do thin coats. It's much easier to fix and cover up thin coats if you do make a mistake than it is thicker glob coats. Because then you just lose detail. It looks like garbage. You're going to have to start all over again. You will not be happy with the result most of the time that you do that, depending on what you're doing. But for this, definitely do not want to go super thick. There's a few spots that I missed. Make sure you get into the grooves. You don't want any black showing. Make sure that you hit everything, and again, as I said, make sure it all goes in one direction so that when you go over it again, it'll be much easier to cover up. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to clean your brushes periodically so that way you don't get dry bunches. Okay, go ahead and do the other direction. So we'll go this way now. Usually want to go a little bit lighter on this one. Again, you're covering up. Take a little bit from here. Scoot that guy over. I'll let these guys dry for another few minutes or so. I'll be back. Okay, we're back. This is on a whole new day. I ended up making a video and I completely forgot to save it, so I'm gonna have to start over. But that's okay. So right now, as you can see, I'm gonna have a whole bunch more. This is my my buddy's setup. So we have the mob base that I just finished up, so that's gonna dry, and I may not even do that for this one. But I'll do a couple of them to show you what's going on as far as the dry brushing that we'll do predominantly, and then we'll get into a little bit of wash as well. So again, we'll have our color mix here, and what we'll do is we started off with our shadow stone. That's the primary base color. I put on about 3 coats just to make sure that all the black was covered up. We don't want any of that showing. And in the center, as I mentioned, you have that mix, so on the slightly darker, slightly lighter. Feel free to take a little bit of each, but don't go drastically on each side, because all the rocks are different. You know, nothing is exactly, no rocks are exactly the same. So what we'll do is we'll take a little bit, and on your dry brush, wipe that off. You don't have to have it dry, but what we'll do, so I'll take this off, the sticky tack. I'll move this to the side so y'all can see what's going on, so it's not too far away. And what we'll do is we dry brush the top. So this is going to have a bit more paint on it than a dry brush will, but it's not going to be wet per se, but we're going to get a lot of color on it. We're going to get just the top of the rocks. Do your best to avoid getting any of this color in between the rocks. And you can add a little bit more color as you want. Again, dry brushing a good amount off. Get that color on there. If you notice in the center, it's still a bit dark. Perfectly fine. You know, as I mentioned, not all rocks are going to be the same. Okay, so it should look something like this. So you can see how dark the undertone is from that base coat, much lighter up on top. Okay, I'll do another one, let that sit aside. So this one will go a slightly different color. You may not be able to tell so much on this video. All the tones will be slightly different. It's best to start off darker and then go lighter. If you wanted to see how it looks. Okay. That one actually went on really well. And just set them aside, and then you continue on as such. If you're wanting to add a little bit of variety, what we can do is I ended up taking up a terrain khaki color that's slightly darker. I don't know if you can tell. So we have the stone gray, it's right here, and the khaki color. You can tell the khaki has a little bit more brown in it. You can do have a little bit to the side. Then you can take a detail brush, a little bit of water, and you can choose to kind of highlight some other rocks around it. They can be smaller ones, they can be larger ones, whichever's up to you. Stick with a color that's very similar to the lightest gray that you're going to use, because the highlight that we're going to do, let's say don't have it as bright, but slightly darker or a slightly off color, because that lightest gray is going to be our highlight. So for this one, I'm not going to go crazy overboard. Just going to highlight a few different rocks. A few small ones and one moderate size one. Okay. I'll do the same on the other one. Do a few small ones. And probably one moderate size one. Or you can even go a couple big ones if you want. It's all up to you. Whatever you want it to look like. Okay. Okay. With that. I'll do a couple more, and then I'll let these guys dry for a moment, and then we'll get on to the next bit. Okay, so after you've given some time for them to dry, and you feel that your accenting is sufficient, what I ended up doing is I added just a couple different rocks. I ended up doing, like I said, a tone that was very similar. I ended up putting a terrain khaki, excuse me, and I mixed it with it's one for one with the stone gray, and then I also mixed the terrain khaki as well with a shadowed stone, and then I kind of accented as I felt, just to give it a little bit of color variation. I did not do that with my initial ones, and that's okay. This is just something that I thought about doing just to add a little bit more character to it. And what we'll do now, after that's all done, your initial dry brushing, now and touch-ups as far as now we're going to do a true dry brushing. And so you are going to have this very, very dry, so that when you're wiping this off, next to no paint is coming off. And you are very lightly going to just highlight very lightly the top. And what this is going to do it's going to make all these rocks stand out, and you're just going to get the edges. So you're not going to touch it up, fill it in, not going to do any of that. Okay, not sure if you can really tell, hopefully you can, but just around the edges, it just gives it a highlight. And so what you'll do after that, you won't really need much time to let that guy dry, since you won't have very much paint on it. What you'll do is you can take any kind of tone that you want, but I'm going to do one will be a soft tone and one will be a dark tone, a strong tone, so this way you can see the difference. So with one, so I ended up doing 3-to-1 with water. So we'll do 3 drops of this to 1 drop of water. So without me mixing it up, because that would be bad. And then we'll do just a single brush. Drop of water, mix it up real well. And then what you'll do is wherever that you want it to be darker, you want to pool it. And it can sit on top if you'd like. But don't go so crazy that all these bubbles start showing up. It kind of messes it up a bit. Just want to drag it where you want. Definitely get it in between. Drag it across. You can leave some rocks open if you want. You don't have to color over it. That'll definitely create some color diversity. But definitely get it in between the rocks, because you want that to be a bit darker since it's all shadowed. Typically, get that going. Okay. So I'm going to let a little bit more so some of this can pool. Slightly darker areas. And some areas will be a little bit lighter, some will be a bit darker. That'll look really fun. Okay, and now we'll switch. So that one is going to be our dark one. Let's this guy off. And now we'll do a light one. So that was strong tone. This will be soft tone. 1, 2, 3. Again, it's still a 3-to-1. So 3 drops of toner and 1 drop of water just to thin it out a little bit. We'll do the same for this. And when you're doing this, you may notice that it may not be as brown or as dark. That's the whole point. The soft tone is meant to help out lighter colors and just very soft details, while the darker tone is meant to sit deeper and bring out intensify those darker colors and help bring out the lighter colors. We'll just let a few areas again pool up just a little bit, and then some areas will be lighter. Okay, so again, that guy will be our dark one, this will be our light one, and then we'll let that dry. I'll finish up the rest of these, and then I'll be able to show you the difference, and then we'll get to flocking. Okay, so now that all this is dried up, we'll just take a look. Hopefully that you can see the difference. So we have our lighter, our soft tone, and we have our strong tone. So as you can see, this guy here is definitely a bit darker. This one does have a light shade of brown to it. This one is a much darker tone. And that's really going to help out as far as bringing out a lot more color on the lighter tones, but this will help make the essentially the base color a bit richer in that darker tone. So it's whatever that you prefer. So we'll take it again. We're going to do, actually, I'm skipping ahead, sorry. So what we're going to do now is the last step as far as the painting, and we're going to do one last dry brushing for the highlights. And again, this is going to be very, very light. So just to show you what it would look like, I've already done the other ones, and this is what they look like. So there's varying contrasts, just so that you can see this was a light tone here. This is a dark tone, another dark tone, a light tone. I believe that was a light tone, and a dark tone. Okay, so again, what we'll do, we'll just take a little bit of our stone gray. We'll wipe off the majority of that, and then very lightly get this guy stable. We're going to go across it, and we're going to bring out, it's going to be difficult, and we're going to bring out those edges again. Again, very, very light. And if you notice that certain parts aren't coming out, you just turn it, and then we'll go in another direction, which I would recommend. So this way you can get multiple sides. Remember that you do have the other side of the brush as well. Okay, so that's one. Let's see if we can get that. Oh, jeez. See if we can get that light. There we go. And we'll do it one more time. Wipe off a good amount. And then this one is the darker tone. Notice, especially on the darker tones, that the highlighting really brings those rocks out and separates the undertones a lot more. Okay, there we go. Okay, excellent. So now, and that's it. We're done with the painting. And if you're wanting to do any more touch-ups, feel free. Again, I added extra colors as far as the rocks, just very subtle tones. Actually, kind of, let's see which one. Yeah, there were a few of them, but they're not meant to stand. They did stand out quite a bit on their own originally, but you can't really tell. Now that we've toned them down with the toner and the highlights are back on. So I know some of the smaller rocks here, and here. Oh, here, and here were highlighted. No, but you can't really tell, and that's totally okay. That's all part of it. Everything's supposed to blend in, even if it stands out. Originally, it may not look very good. Some of that was just trial and error, and it just happened to work out. And so I stuck with those ones after the trial and error. Not that tried this guy and oh my goodness. Okay, so now we're gonna go on to flocking. So this part's really fun. It's one of my favorite parts. So what we're gonna need, I would recommend, is actually we can put this away since we're not going to be painting anymore. I would recommend having a little container of some kind if you have that available to you. And so whether it's a little cup or a cup 1 or 2, depending on how diverse you want your stuff to be. And I'm going to take a couple out. We'll also use 50/50 PVA and water. And so this is just essentially just standard hobby glue. Whether Elmer's glue, it's water-based, so it mixes really well. And what that's going to do is it's going to help us put a lot of this down. And so you can use a variety of flock. There's no right or wrong method to putting it down, but what I will be using, wrong one. What I will be using is, well, you'd be using 3 different kinds. So this is all from Army Painter. I will be using field grass, which is a very rich green. You can see here. I'll be using their dead grass. It just happened to come in a small bag. And then their moss green. And so this I'll be using in smaller amounts to kind of fill in the cracks. That's where moss would grow. And so as far as a mix, you want to open these real carefully because it gets everywhere. It's kind of a pain in the butt to clean. So you can see how bright, maybe how bright that is. The light doesn't help, but it is. It's very bright. It's meant to be very alive. But how I used it with my other ones, let's bring out one. Use it with my other ones. So if it's in the city, it's obviously growing, but there's not much for it to feed off of. So there is a bit of dead grass in there as well, a lot of foot traffic. I know it's dying off. Now, depending on how many that you have, gauge it. If you're planning on doing more, definitely save it. But what you'll do is just take a pinch, just dump it in to one of the cups. Move these guys up here, and then same thing. I'll just do a 50/50. Bring some of this up. Take a pinch about the same size. You could have a little more, a little less. Play with it. They mentioned you can be expressive with it. Throw that in there. Make sure to close your stuff up. Worst thing you can do is drop it. And then it gets everywhere. And then we'll mix all that up. Make sure that it's mixed really good. If you wanted to add a little more of either, just take little dabs here and there. But this should look pretty good. You should have this looking pretty good. And so right there, so we won't need that anymore. We won't need this. And just drop the stuff everywhere. I'll set these guys off to the side. So we don't need that one. Okay. Let's just move that stuff over here. You can see what's going on. And now what we'll do, I would recommend getting some kind of a fine tip instrument. Whether it's, if you're wanting to use, I don't really recommend a copper rod because it's much harder material, but you can. A toothpick will work just fine though. Or if you're wanting to use like a crappy paintbrush, that works actually very well too. I will actually be using both. So what we'll do, make sure that you have a napkin ready, And what you'll do is you'll just take a little bit of glue, just as if you were painting, and find little spots, because we're not doing everything, but you just take little spots and you let it pool. If you think you might need a little bit more, then just take a little bit more of this. So it just happens to be on the side. Just take a little bit more. Just let it pool, and then you find another spot. There we go. And then just at little pinches at a time. When you put this on, you don't want to press it in there, but just kind of let it sit. Just let it do its thing. Give it a little nudge. Keep it in there. I don't have a static grass applicator on me. I've loaned that out, so I'm just going to have to improvise. It'll still work. They just won't stand upright as it's meant to, but you can still make it work. And so once you have that on, give it a few moments. Let that glue work, and then tap off any excess, and then you'll blow on it to get a little bit more excess off. It will also help to activate the static grass just a little bit. And if you're wanting to, you can kind of guide it. If you've noticed that it's kind of steered off a little bit, and kind of get that back in there. If it's starting to go where you don't want it to, tease it a little bit. Again, you don't want to push it, to agitate it too much. And just kind of, as I mentioned, tease it a little bit. So this isn't the final application. What you'll do is you'll let this sit. Actually, I'll just kind of show you how it looks before I go on. There you go. We just have a couple little tufts. And then what you'll do later, obviously, give this glue some time to set. So that'll be probably a couple hours. It should actually cure a little bit faster since it's mostly water. A lot of that will just evaporate off. But what you'll do one more time is once that's dried, add another layer of glue, because that will help give it another coating and help it set even better. Add as many of these tufts as you would like. I'm just going to add a couple, and then I'm going to add a little bit of moss. We'll get this guy off to the side. Where are you? There you are. So with this will be the same. So we'll take a little bit of glue. And we'll put this, we'll just put it right there. Okay. Even though it's still a crappy brush, you still want to keep it looking somewhat presentable. We'll just keep that guy wet. And then what we'll do is we're just going to sprinkle it. We won't need a whole lot. That's it. And you let it kind of, again, make sure it's going where you want. If it's not going where you want, you can always scrape it away. with a softer tip instrument, so this way you don't ruin what you've been laboring over for the past few hours. There we go. And so that's that new little bit, that green spot right there, is some more moss. And so you can play around with it. Another bit that you can use if you're wanting is there is some more brown. They have some more ash colored. So just to show you some other products that you could use. And so for here, you can mix, some of these together, see what works. Ash would look really well, or even some brown on the lighter tones. Ash would probably look a lot better with the darker tones. But experiment. And see what works best for you. Okay. As far as additional steps, that's essentially it. As I mentioned, the last bit that you would want to do, give this another overgo with some glue just to give it a final set, and then spray it down with a sealer. I know whether you want matte sealer. You want that gloss cover, and then either some type of a matte seal, so this way you can bring that gloss finish down so it's not super shiny. But that'll be essentially it, and then you will again end up with products that look like these do. They look really well, and you will be pleased. Okay, so hopefully this helped you out. Hope that you enjoy. If you have any questions or comments, put them down, and I'd like to chat about any other ideas that y'all have. All right, enjoy. Hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you on another video.